Aloha! Welcome back to Season 2 of the Aravinda Show, focused on conscious entrepreneurs, with me, Andrew Crusoe, your host. Today I'm excited to share a pretty unconventional interview with you. In it, we discuss a perspective on life that's totally different than the paradigm we usually think in. To be clear, I don't necessarily agree with all of the conclusions we reach in this interview, but I still find this perspective to be quite useful and very powerful. So take from this interview only that which you feel resonates with you, and enjoy. It's a trip. Today I have the wonderful and wonderfully talented Roxanne Darling of inthetransition.com. And you may know her from her podcast Beachwalks with Rox that had over 2.5 million downloads, over 775 episodes. But now she's transitioned. I didn't even try to do that. To working on inthetransition.com. She's a lifelong student of consciousness, and I think you're going to really enjoy what she has to say today. I had the pleasure of meeting her several years ago, 2-3 years ago, in her lovely, lovely, lovely Maui home, and it's an incredible place. Thank you so much, Rox, for joining me today and sharing some time with me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted.
I'm really having a lot of fun with this series, and I haven't really done an interview series like this in a long time, and I had to have you. I had to ask you one, and I'm really glad you accepted. I guess a good place to start is, how did you come to Hawaii? You didn't grow up on Hawaii, right?
That's correct. I first came to Hawaii in 1971. My dad had a sales meeting over here, and I was in college at UC Berkeley. And he and my mom said, "Why don't you come over and spend the week with us?" And so I did, and it was a life-changing experience for me. The core of it was I had my first massage ever, and I had it with a traditional Hawaiian healer who started the experience by chanting and singing over me.
Wow.
And I started crying, and I cried pretty much for the whole hour.
Oh my goodness.
I was so moved. And, he was laughing and saying, "Why are you crying?" And then of course, "You have so much stress for such a young woman." Yeah, I did. But, he told me all of these stories of growing up with his grandmother teaching him how to catch fish by hand, his hands,
Mm-hmm.
standing in the shallow waters, and how he learned about the herbs and the plants. And it was a magical experience for me. And I made 18 vacation trips here, and
18.
18. So, it became a regular part of my life, go to Hawaii every year or two. And then I came here with my partner, Shane,
Mm-hmm.
in the year 2000, maybe
Mm-hmm.
2001. And he got off the plane and said, "I'm moving here." He just felt it in his bones, and he's a very direct person.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, "Okay, well, let's figure it out." And being that we have technology, internet company, we can work from anywhere. And a year and a half later, we moved.
Wow. And of those 18 trips, were most of them to Maui, or did they vary at all?
Oh, I was an equal opportunity island hopper.
That's good.
So a lot to Maui, but I visited all the islands,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah.
Well, what's interesting about I mean, Hawaii in a way is a miracle that it's even there. I mean, it's in the middle of the Pacific plate. It's in the middle of this tectonic plate, and for some reason there's a hot spot there that comes really close to the surface, and that's why we have these islands.
Yeah, they're all volcanic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So
So you were coming to Maui. I'm curious, do you recall the first time? One of the things I love to ask people is what it felt like for them, really the first moment or the first hour where they landed and they smelled the air, because this comes up a lot. Is it just the air is different there? It's some of the cleanest air on the planet, and just you feel the charge, you feel the land, and I think in a different way.
I don't actually recall that part. Um,
Is it mostly the massage? Because, well, you had such a powerful massage experience after.
kind of like rewrote the disc and said, this is the thing here. um, I don't remember that part of it, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I definitely experience it all the time
Hmm.
coming back here. And Shane certainly got it, as you're talking about it, he definitely got it. So I think, who knows? I don't remember that part of it, but it was on the Big Island.
Oh,
That was my
really?
first. Yes, we were at the Mauna Kea Beach Hotel,
Oh.
and I think it's still called that. I'm not sure, but amazing resort,
Hmm.
incredible Hawaiian art collection on the property, and I was the daughter of one of the big shots, and so everybody just took such great care of me.
Oh,
It
I didn't know
was
that.
amazing.
So your dad worked for that hotel at the time.
No, he worked for an auto company, but they were having their sales meeting, so all the top salespeople were sent there, and he was the sales manager, so it was kind of his party that he was throwing.
Oh, I see.
Um,
That's fun.
yeah.
There's one thing I'm really curious about, which is, do you remember what kind of massage it was? Was it Lomi Lomi? Was it another kind of Hawaiian massage?
Yes, it was Lomi Lomi.
Ah, okay. I'm somewhat familiar with that.
Hmm.
So you come to Hawaii and you were already an entrepreneur at the time. It sounds like you had already been growing your business. Where were you? Where did you start your business then?
Well, the business Bare Feet Studios, actually, my partner Shane started. He started that in 1996 in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Uh,
And I was a consultant to the company and ended up, the other partners left and I came on board and we moved the company to Hawaii and
wow.
life is good.
Okay, you're skipping over a couple things, Roxy. And it's okay. We have to
It
try
was
to.
so long ago, Evan.
I know, but origin stories are great because you can understand. One of the things I loved in the first interview was understanding how, I mean, there's sort of been a pattern that's forming as I noticed that there are a lot of the entrepreneurs that I'm interviewing are couple teams. On
Hmm.
Hawaii, I feel like it's more common, and for whatever reason, and I think there's a lot to be learned. So, did he hire you, or did you know him before you consulted for the company?
I was working at the time. I had 6 months of my life when I had a regular salaried position, and I was marketing advisor at the Small Business Development Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And his firm was one of my clients. And so that's the main way that we um, got connected.
Wow. And you guys have been together for a while now.
18 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, you've had Bare Feet Studios. You become a partner with Shane in the business. I'm guessing that happened after you guys were dating for a while.
Well, it was all business first, and then interacting through the business,
Hmm.
we discovered our attraction for each other. So then it was kind of a parallel development.
Were you ever concerned? You know, some people have concerns about working with the person, or not really work. I think it's less of an issue when you're in business together, but when someone's your employee or you're their consultant or something, were you concerned that, oh, I shouldn't really date someone who I have a who I'm in maybe in an employee situation with? Was there ever that concern, or was it just like, you know what, this feels in the flow and I'm gonna go with this?
Well, let me, I'll just tell you the true story. Um,
That sounds great.
Shane was actually married at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so the fact that he was married was a natural throttle, shall we
Right.
say?
Right, right.
But it was not enough of a throttle to stop the obvious um,
Like
deep
chemistry.
deeper connection that we
Mhm.
had. So,
Well, I don't have to
I
release this. If I could cut this part out if you want.
No, I don't mind. I just don't want to spend the time talking about that. But
Sure.
these are things that happen, and people can have their opinions. And really, the only three people involved, we're all totally okay with it.
There you go.
Um,
That's what matters the most.
yes.
I do think it informs, though, like the history does inform
Hmm.
the present.
It does, and I think a lot of people are ashamed of aspects of their history.
Definitely.
And part of my transition in consciousness is to really practice radical self-acceptance.
Amen.
And
Let's do it.
that's a part of the history.
Yeah.
The interesting sidebar to that
Mm-hmm.
is that I was at the time working with the guys who I think I've told you about, but they're the channeled entities
You told me a little bit.
who've been my coach for almost 25 years now. And Shane started working with them, and then his wife started working with them. And so it really was a very consciousness centered process that we all went through in terms of working together, and Shane then exiting his marriage, going through a divorce with his wife,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone understanding what the human dynamics were
Mm-hmm.
and how to be respectful to oneself and to the other people involved. So it's possible.
You're giving me a perfect transition segue to the next part, which is all about in the transition, your website and what I would call, this exploration of consciousness. It's something that you're doing because you feel moved to do it. I suppose there's a business component. You have a workshop or had a workshop.
In the transition is was my blog that I started in 2004, and it was just my personal blog.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, it's where I've put things that don't fit on any of the other websites that I manage. So
Right.
it is definitely potpourri of things. But I have done a fair amount of coaching and workshops and retreats and that sort of thing relating to my love of consciousness. But it hasn't been, I don't promote it much, and it hasn't been a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. So, yeah, business, nah. Has it generated some revenue? Yes.
Sure.
But it hasn't been a quote, a business per se. But I think the consciousness aspects and working with the guys and this these ideas of the transition, they totally get the credit for Shane and I being able to stay in business and
Mm.
being able to improve our business practices, as well as staying a couple, which in our case has had periods of extraordinary difficulty and
Sure.
challenge.
I mean, 18 years, people grow and change, you know, and
Yes.
obviously, and that brings with it challenges that I feel people who have a relationship for 2 years or 3 years, I don't think that I can truly understand what it must be like to share that much with someone over 18 years. That's awesome, but I'm sure that unique challenges come up.
Yes, and unique is probably the operative word, because much as all the book writers want us to think, there aren't formulas for relationships, and there aren't um, every relationship, I believe, is unique because every person is unique, and so you
Mhm.
put two uniques together and you're going to get a unique thing on the other side. And the relationship per se is it's not real in a sense.
Hmm.
It's just what happens when two people
Mhm.
interact together. And I think sometimes too much pressure is put on, quote, the capital R relationship. Our
Mhm.
relationship isn't working. Well, all that means is that you two aren't working.
Yeah. It's a
So,
concept, right?
yes, take the pressure off of making this thing that is external work, and
Mhm.
put the attention on the two internal beings and
Mhm.
go from there.
So I want to get to what you mean by the guys, that it sounds like there's some channeling and wisdom coming through. And that you're saying, if I understand correctly, that the what's come through has not only helped you in relationship, but also with Bare Feet Studios, which it's your main business. Is that correct? Bare Feet Studios, and that
Yes,
seems
that's our company, LLC.
LLC.
Barefoot Studios, LLC.
Yeah, and primarily, what do you do at Bare Feet Studios? Just in case people are curious.
We build websites and in the past have done social media campaigns for our clients.
Cool, cool. So let's get to the guys that you talk about.
The
How,
guys, yeah.
how did that first start?
A friend of mine introduced me to the guys. The guys are non-human channeled entities,
Mm-hmm.
a group soul who have never been human,
Hmm.
and they are channeled through a woman in Santa Fe. And this woman
Oh.
was a friend of my friend's, and so she was one of the first, shall we say, guinea pigs for the channeling.
Mm-hmm.
And she was having, just remarkable insights and speed bumps removed in her life as a result of working with the guys. And I was in a really difficult personal situation. I was married at the time myself and going through a very difficult divorce. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started talking to the guys myself, and it was just mind boggling how
Wow.
they have an ability to simplify things that seem and feel really complex.
Mm-hmm.
Their skill, their contribution is to look at the energy.
Hmm.
And they have zero moral imperative, and they don't care how anything turns out.
Hmm.
They are simply here to share the ideas of this transition game,
Hmm.
which is very different, almost the opposite of the hierarchical game
Mm-hmm.
that in their construct humans have been playing forever and ever.
Long time.
And so looking at the energy, they can see where, in my case, me, where I was, kind of all over the map, saying one thing, doing another thing, feeling a third thing, wanting a fourth thing.
Oh
And
boy, Rox, it sounds exhausting.
it was. But it's the human quote condition
Yeah.
because the hierarchy, the way the rules that are set up is, there's a right way and a wrong way. And
Mm-hmm.
mostly there's something wrong with every one of us. And it's our purpose on earth to figure out what's wrong and become good. I no longer ascribe to that belief system.
Oh, that whole thing is just it's the programming that we're surrounded with.
Hmm.
So there you introduced some terms that we
Hmm.
haven't really defined yet. What do you when you talk about the hierarchical game? Because I realize that most people listening to this probably don't have a clear definition of what that means. What is your favorite definition of the hierarchical game?
Well, if I step back just a little bit,
Sure, go
um,
ahead.
my belief is that we are all the divine, incarnated as humans, walking the earth, playing with limits and boundaries, space and time.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything here is a game. And forever and ever and ever, there was only one game, and that was the hierarchical game.
Mm-hmm.
And so Spirit, when it figured out how to incarnate and then chose to incarnate, they set up a rule that the moment you incarnate, you forget that you're divine.
Yeah.
So we spend our whole time as humans going from slime to trying to figure out how to be sublime, how to return to our God nature.
Right, right. Well, it ties back into some other conversations I've had, and basically how you forget if past lives are happening,
Hmm.
you forget the minute you're born. Apparently, being born is one of the most traumatic experiences that, as a human, it's pretty traumatic because you don't know who you are, you don't know where you are, you're freezing. There's a sudden sense of separation from everything, which ultimately isn't real, but I don't know. That's what comes
But
to mind when we
but
talk
by
about that.
but it was really, really fun for so long
Yeah.
to start at ground zero and
Hmm.
have no power, no memory of your divinity, and to see what you can make of all that.
Hmm.
And um,
It reminds me a lot of what I've been listening to in Alan Watts lectures, which I'm sure are you familiar with Alan Watts?
oh yes,
Yeah, he talks about that a lot and how it's such a thing in even in Hinduism. I'm hearing slight similarities to Indian perspectives too about how this is the game, going around and around.
yes and no, but we don't have to get in the weeds. It's very, it's very simple on the surface.
Hmm.
This the difference between the hierarchy and the transition. Um, in the hierarchy, there is a no-win game, and there is a pretend criteria for everything.
Hmm.
You can look it up on the internet. This is right, this is wrong. But of course, people disagree about that all the time,
Yeah.
which is the proof for the transition, which is there is an absolute criteria for nothing.
Hmm.
And really, it isn't. And this is really what has helped our business in many ways
Oh
is
yeah, please share that.
stepping aside from the right way to do something
Hmm.
versus what is our way to do
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
because it's our business.
Absolutely.
And people spend a lot of time, especially younger people in business, chasing the perfect logo, the perfect business card, the
Hmm.
perfect this, the perfect that. They've read all the books, they're following the business
Formula.
gurus, and they're trying to find that formula. And then they wonder why it's just not working. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Well, it's
Hmm.
because it's not the formula's fault. It's that there is no formula. That this notion of being authentic and being true to yourself, and instead of sorting for good or bad, sort instead for like, don't like. And in
Um,
fact, you can find so many examples of business innovation because the people they were thinking outside the box. They were saying, I don't care about the rules. This is what I want to do.
really testing for their own resonance with an idea. It sounds like they're following
Yes,
their. I'm guessing this goes back to getting in touch with your inner guidance system.
yes. Who are you and what do you want to do and what do you not want to do? And can you not do those things and still be successful? Okay, let's give it a try. you know,
Yeah.
um,
So, how does it work if you want to do something, but it is perceived, or perhaps you have. I mean, we start to get to a place where what is real? How do you validate what is real? If you feel like you need to do something, but maybe you feel it will hurt someone, how do you figure that out from a transition perspective?
well, in one way, it's much easier from a transition perspective because I recognize everyone as the divine. And in
Yeah.
my world, no one else is one down or one up. And so having this vibe or this energy or this resonance of peership is so powerful that it
Hmm.
literally changes the options that show up in my brain.
Ah.
If I think or feel that someone is dependent on me for their business to be successful,
Hmm.
that's going to color how I interact with them. It's
Absolutely.
it's putting me in a one up position and them in a one down position.
Mm.
And that's part of why I was drawn to the internet so early on is I this notion of peership, peer to peer, fill in the blank, is so powerful on so
Mm.
many levels. I wrote something on my Barefoot Studios blog eons ago, like well over 10 years ago, and it was called something like the customer is not always right.
Oh,
So that's one of those, customer's always right. Just give them what they want, do what they want.
it's a
And
mantra
my
that we hear in America.
It is. It is. And the case that I made is no, the customer isn't always right. That's why they hire someone to
Hmm.
help them,
Hmm.
to give them a second opinion, to teach them something they don't already know, to help them decide which way to go in terms of making business decisions. And, to be able to have more of a collaborative relationship is a much more functional relationship between a vendor and a client, in my experience. And so that allows me to sometimes give the client what could be called bad news,
Ah, yes.
because it's in service of a shared goal that is
Mhm.
outside of any one of us.
It feels very co-creative. You don't see yourself as above them. You're just making this together, and then you can get in alignment with your goals. And it's probably much more efficient at the end of the day.
I think it is because I certainly expend a lot less emotional energy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, Shane and I are both we're super intense people. We love learning. We for ourselves are perfectionists in many ways and best practice this and that.
Yeah.
Um, and it took us a while in our business to realize not everyone wants our best.
Mm.
And one of the things I learned from the guys, which I then learned is actually a quote from uh, G.K. Chesterton, I think is his name, but it was anything worth doing is worth doing badly.
Interesting. I have not heard that.
It just goes against all of the you must be your best, you must be your best. Well, no,
Yeah.
there are a lot of situations where a certain task just needs to get done and marked as done
Mm-hmm.
so we can move the process forward. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be pixel pushed
Or perfect.
or perfect. It just needs to get done. So anyone
Mm-hmm.
can do it. It's kind of like doing the dishes, in a relationship, like you didn't stack the dishwasher right. Well, did they get clean? Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. Um,
you can
you
learn a
know,
lot about your relationship through dishes. I've
in
learned.
the kitchen.
Yeah, you can. It's
Yeah,
definitely a growth experience.
right. So being able to say, you know what, you're the client, you're paying me, you get to make the ultimate decision. Here's, choice A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
And then to not, go home at night and say, I can't believe they chose C. What the hell were they
Oh, I
thinking?
wish I couldn't
Well,
relate to that.
they know more than I do about certain aspects of their business. And it's just been delightful watching us be wrong at
Yeah.
times over time. And to realize, boy, am I glad that wasn't all on my shoulders, back to that peership. Like, it's not just my decision, it's just not my responsibility exclusively. It's a joint operation here.
So if there's no hierarchy, then the responsibility must therefore be shared completely equally, right?
Not, I wouldn't say necessarily completely equally. Um, I think it really depends on the situation.
Okay.
It depends on how much information a client wants or doesn't want.
Mm-hmm. And also, if it's their business, like that, it would make sense that they're more responsible, and the amount of time they decide to spend with you if they've reached out to you,
Hmm.
it's a little more on them.
At the end of the day, it's their business.
Yes.
The way I like to operate is to be honest and kind and respectful.
Mm-hmm.
I've been loving this. We have all this politics of false equivalence.
Yeah.
Um, both sides are right. And
Yeah.
and there's Christiana Amanpour, who's a journalist I've respected for a really long time. She's has this ad for a show she's doing, and she says, "I will be truthful, not neutral."
Mm.
And that really resonates with me. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just tell the truth and don't try to protect people from the truth and don't try to dress up the truth. Or in my mind, my history being, professional codependent, like put the truth in a little
Mm.
gift box and make it look real pretty and they won't notice that it's really bad news. Oh no, that doesn't work. That backfires.
Yeah.
So being remembering that everyone is the divine
Right.
and
Right.
everything here we are safe. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have to worry about it. Even when really horrible things happen,
Mm-hmm.
that's because some part of my soul is interested in having that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to jump from the psychological to the metaphysical is a really handy tool.
Oh,
for helping
yes.
me stay calm.
Do you feel that the main reason that people are so afraid of pain and in death, and this comes up for me a lot, is that on some level they wonder or believe that that's it, that they're going to be judged the second that, they die. I wonder how much people's actions is very direct, at least on an unconscious level, is very, very connected with what they believe what will happen when they die. I mean, obviously it is connected, but I just wanted to explore that. Because if they believe that, hey, my soul is indestructible, which is incidentally what I believe, maybe their actions and attitudes would be different.
I think they would be different. And I do believe the soul is indestructible. And I do believe that most people are playing the hierarchical game, which starts off with forgetting your connection to soul, forgetting your connection to the divine. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're playing that game, it's a much more effective game if you forget that and you get to play with
Yeah.
being terrified and you get to
Yeah.
play with judging yourself to the moon and back. Yeah, I'm personally tired of that game.
I hear you.
I would rather play, you know, being a little bit more gutsy. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, I wonder if I could try this. I wonder if I could try this. Ooh, that might, my mind says, my inner critic, my fearful
Mm.
little self who is like, the grand master in the hierarchy. She will come in and say, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And I have a sidebar, a sub game with her, and I say, let's try it and see.
Mm.
You sit back and watch, and we'll check in later.
And that's the part
And
of you that's afraid of these outcomes, like the little you is how you describe it.
little me, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
Little me has no idea how powerful every soul is who is here.
So there's something that I have been thinking about, which is
Hmm.
so the guys, the quote unquote the guys, is that a label that they chose for themselves? I'm curious. I'm more
Yes.
curious about them now.
Yes, and they speak through the channeler, and they use the we pronoun.
Oh, okay.
So I don't understand it. Let me
Yeah.
just be really blunt. I
Please
I
be
can't
blunt.
I
Hey,
I
this is.
don't understand how it works, but I have witnessed it work.
Have you ever been in the room when the main? So it sounds like have you channeled them as well?
I took a channeling class, and I do what I call automatic writing,
Oh yes.
which a lot of people do that. It's considered a mild form of channeling
Mm-hmm.
your soul's voice or something.
You're sort of letting something else kind of borrow your hand for a second. Is that a fair?
Yeah, yeah. And sort of tapping into a different part of the knowledge that's available. And it's a kick, because I regularly write thoughts that I've never thought before.
Wow. So how do you make yourself open to that and make sure that that opening is not abused or isn't opening you up to anything that's potentially harmful? What is your perspective on that?
Well, I don't. I'm not afraid of that. So whatever I might write down,
Mm-hmm.
whatever this idea du jour might be,
Mm-hmm.
it's still my conscious choice whether I want to act on it or not. And if
Mm-hmm.
I want to act on it, it's then further my conscious choice how and when
Right.
I want to act on that. So I don't see really where any harm could come in
That's fair.
because again, and this is a very radical thought, Andrew. It's taken me forever to really get it in my bones, and I still have a long ways to go, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm safe.
Yeah.
The worst that can happen is I die.
Mm-hmm.
My body dies, and I
Mm-hmm.
can come back.
Mm-hmm.
As a soul on the other side, I can say, well, whoa, that ended way too quickly. I'm
Yeah.
going back. Or I might say,
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to stay longer. I guess I was done for a while. But to have that as my quote, full stop,
Yeah.
I'm always safe,
Yeah.
then that eliminates a whole lot of language in my vocabulary and it eliminates a whole lot of self doubt and it eliminates a lot of rumination, most of which wants to pull me back into the hierarchy, which by definition, no one is safe.
We're getting those messages all the time.
Yes. Yeah. You've got to constantly be looking out for yourself,
Yeah, they're out to
right?
get you.
They're out to get you. Yeah. And if you look at it from the point of think of it as a game, literally like a computer game.
I often do.
What a kick that is. What a gas that is. How much fun that is.
Oh man.
And it's fun because when you're done, you can just shut the thing down.
Yeah.
Well, just all I do is apply that metaphor to my quote real life and my
Yeah.
real business.
I am so reminded by so much of the Alan Watts lectures that I've listened to. I feel like I've listened to most of them at this point. This is really similar. He asked this question of what if you were the infinite consciousness and you wanted to play a game? You could fall asleep and you could imagine whatever you wanted and do whatever you wanted. Well, you can do that a few times and you'd probably get kind of bored. So then you go, okay, now we're going to make it interesting. Now there's going to be danger, you know? And now you're
Hmm.
kind of like having conflict, but you still know it's a game. And then you have an
Hmm.
idea, go, what if I forgot that it was a game? That would really be a gas, right? And you're reminding me very much of his thoughts around that. I mean, they're obviously not just his thoughts. These thoughts have been around for a while. And it's such a consciousness shift, though.
It is. It is. I like to say consciousness is everything. It changes everything. And to be able to live that way, it is amazing the impact that it can make. I'll just give you one business example. Long time ago, back in Santa Fe, we had a real estate client who is a global brand who is based there. And they hired us because,
Mm-hmm.
quote, we were the best. This was, before WordPress. So we were building all of these content management systems by hand.
Wow.
And, it was a beautiful site. And anyway, the client was just rude and complaining and difficult and wanted to take our
Mm,
work and clone it across all of her affiliates worldwide without a licensing fee.
mm,
And we ended up terminating the relationship.
mm.
Our little critic voices and many of our colleagues were just terrorized. Like, you cannot fire her. You cannot fire this brand. She will. One, you're giving up a huge piece of cachet. Two, this woman is
Mm-hmm.
mean and she will destroy you in this town. Well, we
Mm-hmm.
had the benefit of the transition, which is like, don't like,
Mm-hmm.
not good, bad. And we just said, we don't like working with this
Mm-hmm.
client. We are willing to suffer the potential consequences. But given the fact that she's so mean
Mm-hmm.
to us, she's probably, and we did find this out later, she was
Mm-hmm.
rather, rough with several other vendors. So it actually turned out that we
Of
were like,
course.
oh my gosh, they had the guts to fire her. That's amazing. I wish I could do that. It turned itself 180 degrees and we were much happier. And she
Mm-hmm.
survived. She's also the divine incarnate playing with limits and boundaries, space and time.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have to worry for
Mm.
her, even though we were very, proud of our code and we didn't think anyone else could do as good a job as we had done. Maybe they couldn't, by some crazy pretend objective standards. But nonetheless, we didn't like working with her. We didn't like coming to work to have to work on her project. So we ended it and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been much harder to do that from the hierarchical mindset than from the transition mindset. I think you can sort of
Hmm.
sense that in the energy.
I very much do. It reminds me of, this
Hmm.
concept of just
Hmm.
testing for resonance. You know, you pass it through all of your I don't know, the phrase that's coming to me in the moment is like wisdom centers, which is, your gut. Like how is
Hmm.
your body reacting to this idea? Your
Hmm.
body talks pretty loud if you listen.
Hmm.
And, your head,
Hmm.
okay, does this make logical sense, quote unquote logical sense? And your heart. And if an idea passes all those tests,
Hmm.
it's probably
Hmm.
a pretty good
I
idea.
I like to think of it as it's very similar, but it's a little tweak. Wisdom is a little bit of a word like, oh, well, for a person like me who used to have low self esteem, I would say, well, I don't really have any wisdom. I'm just all over the map. But when I
Mm,
reframe it as subjective preferences, which gets back to that core question, who am I and what do I want?
mm,
Then I don't have to go outside of myself, or Shane and I, as joint in the business, we didn't have to go outside of ourselves to look for justification for a business decision. We went inside ourselves and we ran it through not an objective filter, but a subjective filter. What do I like about working with
mm-hmm.
this client? What do I not like about working with this client? What's the balance sheet look like on that? Whoa. um, and then you trust that. You trust your subjective preferences. You
Right.
see, but in the hierarchy, you can't, because somebody's going to always say, prove it, or justify it, or make a case for it so that I can respect you or copy you or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. But if really the only case you have to make is your own subjective case,
Mm-hmm.
that's radical self-acceptance.
Yeah.
I know some people may think this is a crazy decision, but I want to make a driverless car
I'm
and I'm going to go do it,
so excited for
you
this.
know. And it's happened so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really happened so quickly. And that I can still remember, oh hell no. I don't want,
Have you seen
you
any
know,
auto cars on Maui yet? I think that's what we're gonna call them.
no, not that I know of,
Oh,
but I'm kind of a hermit. But see that,
okay.
there was somebody who just had a really strong subjective
Mm-hmm.
desire.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also, kind of, it's an interesting thing of technology and the interconnectedness of, ideas showing up simultaneously at different points around the earth.
Oh, it's
Um,
almost the exact same time. It's
yeah,
happened
yeah.
many times. Radio,
So that's soul. That's soul saying,
paper.
reaching critical mass. A
Mm-hmm.
bunch of us have this idea. We want to bring it to reality,
Wow.
and not being afraid of that because you can't prove it or make the case
Mm,
for it, or your partner. This is where relationship issues come in. Because we started off very autonomously, which has been very helpful because neither one of us was supporting the other.
right.
One person often in a relationship says, well, don't, honey, you really shouldn't take that risk because we need the money.
Right.
And, oh, that's heavy, that's intense, it's real, you
Yeah.
know. And how do you navigate that? Little bit by little bit, just practicing. And at the
Practicing.
end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do. You're the divine. Who's going to tell the divine you're wrong?
You're the divine talking to the divine.
Yeah, exactly.
So it has so much built-in respect at the same time too. Respect for
Hmm.
yourself and respect for everyone around you, and
Yeah,
helps with patience.
right. Because, I think I want something. I've done ABC through XYZ and it still hasn't shown up. Well, the instinct is what's wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
but there's nothing wrong with me because I'm the divine. So then that moves the conversation to, okay, well, soul, I did the entire alphabet and it's not here yet. I'm getting the message that you think there's something more relevant for me.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move on. And, that's that part of the mind that, can be so certain that something is meant for me. But if it doesn't show up, then I have to realize, well, I guess it's not meant for me. If it were, it would be here.
Or maybe not in that way.
Right, right. It could be any number of permutations. And so, I got this mantra from the guys 4 years ago, and it has proven to just be full of gold. They said to me, this must be perfect, otherwise it wouldn't be happening.
Wow. That's a big idea. I think
It's a huge idea.
because you think, well, okay, all right, but we have over 7 billion people that all have wants and desires, and they're all making decisions. And you're proposing that even when one of those people, I mean, how rough should I be? I mean, when they kill somebody
As
else,
rough as you want.
yeah, when they murder someone else, I mean, how do you reconcile that? That's the question that I would have.
That's the divine incarnate playing with murder.
Mm. I mean, that's heavy stuff. Like, how do you respond to that when something that we see as a crime happens? How does it? That's right. That's, to me, that's the challenge for me. I'm on board with your perspective, but that's the challenge that would come up for me.
Well, that's the gap that just takes an enormous amount of, I think I could say, rewiring, to be sort of accurate.
Sure.
That takes the rewiring to go from watching murder in a movie theater and being totally fine with it because it's, quote, entertainment.
Ugh.
And stepping outside the theater.
I still don't like it.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of murder. I don't know if I could ever kill someone or not. I haven't been put in the position.
Right.
Obviously, there are souls who love killing each other.
Yeah.
And stealing from each other. And sabotaging each other's businesses. And lying. And cheating, and just, we could go on and list all the
destructive stuff.
The 7 deadly sins.
Even if it's just a game, it's still destructive in the game's context.
Right, but where would the game be without it?
I don't know.
It's an interesting question to ponder.
It's a very interesting question, Rox.
Because we have this notion of silver linings. And I think, I haven't proven this, I'm happy to accept it at face value, but I think it's impossible for something, quote, bad to happen without something, quote, good coming afterwards.
You feel like there's balance in the force in that way?
Well, it's not so much that it's balance, it's that we don't see things until they're presented in certain lights. And
can you give me an example?
Let's see here. What would be a good example? Well, I mean, let's just take the whole gun thing.
Sure.
Every other country but the United States has really strict gun control laws, and they don't kill each other with guns. We have no, it's completely the opposite here. My personal subjective preference is that I have no interest in having a gun. I have no interest in killing a person or another animal. It's not why I became vegetarian, but that part of vegetarianism resonates with me.
Yeah. I feel the same way.
And there are, obviously, I cannot deny that there are a lot of people who like fighting and shooting guns and killing people and animals. If I sit here and say everyone is the divine incarnate, playing with limits and boundaries, space and time, who the hell am I to say you cannot shoot another person?
All right, because it's all part of the divine, and it's not destructible at the end of the day, right?
Yes, exactly. Now, I don't have to like it, and I am free as the divine in this lifetime to spend every waking hour trying to get guns out of everywhere. You see, they're not mutually exclusive.
Interesting.
And to me, to me, knowing what my subjective preferences are and then going full steam ahead with them
Mm.
is so much more direct and powerful and clear than me trying to pretend that I have the moral high ground and that's why there should be no guns. To me, that's the weaker argument.
Right. So when people ask for you for your reason,
I don't have a reason. This is just who I am in this lifetime.
interesting.
I can't justify it, and I don't want to make a case that it's morally superior.
So that's the difference, or one of the differences. When
Mm-hmm.
people try to make an argument, they'll go, "Oh, I have these statistics and I have these things." But
Mm-hmm.
from a transition standpoint, you just say, "Well, I don't like this just because it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't seem like a good idea for me." And I guess you don't really need to provide evidence. Don't you feel like it might be more effective for certain people? Yeah.
Sure. And so if it's around, if everything is subjective, then I can run my gun control mission any way I wish.
Right.
And it gets very meta very quickly.
How does it get meta? I like it when things get meta.
Well, because if everyone is the divine,
Yeah.
then the little monkey mind inside of me, keep in mind, she's like a little kid. She's not anywhere near as neurologically or physiologically or psychologically or spiritually developed as I am as a grown adult woman.
Right.
So she literally can't put two and two together that everyone is the divine. And I can go balls to the wall to try to get rid of guns in the United States of America. She kind of can't compute those. She goes, well, if everyone's allowed to have a gun, then you should just ignore them. Well, that I could do that too.
Uh-huh.
And that's pretty much what I do, by the way.
Yeah.
I I don't spend every waking hour lobbying for gun control.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be my preference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to sign a petition here and there.
I just wanted to ask you.
So can I finish one thing though?
Yes, please.
This must be perfect.
Yes.
People confuse that with, oh, this is the perfect situation, and I have to somehow bend myself to accept it and then like it because it's, quote, perfect. No, 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 no. By saying this is perfect, otherwise it wouldn't be happening, is a Jedi mind trick.
Yeah, it's a big idea.
It's a fast track to accepting reality.
Yeah.
How many times, like that's one of our admonitions. Oh, you're living in a fantasy world. Just accept reality. Well, actually, if you think everything is perfect, otherwise it would not be happening. That is a fast way to say, okay, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do I want to do about it?
Right. What do I want of this?
Again, I don't have to like it. I don't have to celebrate it. But the mere fact of saying, oh, soul's in charge, soul has my back. I may be terrified, I may be angry, I may be massively confused. But if I can accept it as perfect on the metaphysical level, on the soul level, then I can stop this very breath. I can stop fighting it. And fighting it is what locks down the system, my mind, my body, my heart, my soul, and prevents me from actually figuring out how the hell do I get out of this situation that I don't like.
Wow. So maybe taken from another way, when you have radical acceptance of your reality as you're experiencing it, once you have that radical acceptance, it gives you more creativity in how to proceed forward, not to mention more power.
Yes. And versus the alternative, which is the mantra of, oh my God, this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? What is wrong with me? This shouldn't be happening. What did I do wrong?
And taking it personally.
Which are all highly ineffective questions.
Yeah. Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Who is me?
The divine incarnate walking the earth,
right.
Playing with limits and boundaries,
right.
Space and time.
But it's like
that's who you are.
Exactly. But it's like the me italicized in quotes, it's also
right.
a
It's
construct.
Little me is really confused about that.
Yeah.
Little me says, but I did everything right. Why is this happening?
Oh, yeah.
Little me can't understand, just literally, physically is not able to understand, which is why, adult me is so relevant and why it's so useful for adult me to take charge of that conversation in the mind that
Wow.
says, okay, that was a bummer. This must be perfect. Otherwise, it wouldn't be happening. Now, what do I want to do? I mean, I find having practiced that, for a few years now, it is amazing how quickly I can flip a
Mm,
literal panic response in my body
mm-hmm. Oh my
to,
goodness, yeah.
oh, okay, I can handle this. Let's figure this out.
And then the more you do that, the more aware you are of, oh, I mean, this is how meditation has helped me. Is you go, oh,
Hmm.
I'm having an anxiety thing right now, even if it's not a, according to Hoyle, panic attack. You know when you're
Uh-huh.
having anxiety. You go,
Anxiety,
where is this coming
yes.
from? What is
Hmm.
what am I believing that's causing this? What is the bigger truth of what's going on here?
Hmm.
Are you okay for time, by the way, Rox? You okay to go for
Yes.
another?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay,
Hmm.
okay. Just wanted to make sure. So here's a question that, yeah, because this is going so well, and
Oh, good.
I have so many, I have so many extra questions around this because I knew this was a big idea, and I thanks again for being up for talking about it on the show. I think that these ideas are very, 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 very useful. This perspective is very powerful and very freeing.
I've been studying this line of thinking for 25 years now. And it's so interesting how, 5 years in, 10 years in, I thought, oh, yeah, I got this.
Uh,
I have a clue.
right, right,
I
right.
mean, I did have a clue, but it's so deep. And then I think to myself, well, humans have literally played the hierarchical game for
Yeah,
millions of years,
yeah.
So the transition has really only been around for 40 or 50 years.
Mm-hmm,
So we're all just little babies at figuring it out and
mm-hmm.
playing with it and having fun with it.
Well, that springs to mind some new questions. Well, I think the one that's been attracting me the most out of all the questions in my head is, what do you tell someone who says, I really like this perspective, I find it resonates with me, but the person, not me, but the person, because I don't think this way, but a lot of people that I meet go, hey, I can't really believe that my soul is indestructible. Or they say, or they might believe that, but they might think, well, I was raised to believe in this duality of if you are not worthy, you go to a bad place when you die. And if you're worthy, you go to a good place when you die. How do you, and this is a really common belief in our society,
Hmm.
how do you talk about the transition game to people with that belief?
Well, for one, it's 100% opt-in process,
Right.
meaning there is no should in the transition. Therefore, there is no proselytizing or
Mm-hmm.
imperative for anyone to know any of it. So, most of my really good friends are playing the hierarchical game and having a blast.
Uh-huh.
When I was younger in this process of understanding, I used to think of it as very binary, like, well, you're either doing the transition or you're doing the hierarchy, and there is just no middle ground.
Right.
Now, technically, there is no middle ground. You're either playing one game or the other. However,
Hmm.
there is the time space continuum. So you can play the hierarchical game on this topic and that topic and another topic, and you can play the transition game on another topic. So, in the hierarchy, it is built into the game that you're kind of stuck there and you're stuck with those rules that
Mm.
something's wrong with you. But in the transition, you're not stuck. In the transition, the only thing that's different is that, oh, I remember that I'm divine. Oh, if I'm divine, then I can do whatever I want. Oh, okay. Well, I feel like getting in a argument on Facebook about religion. You know, I can do that if I want. Um,
Yeah.
but in my case, I don't really want, I'm not interested in that, so I don't do that. But I
Mm-hmm.
could.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other thing that gets kind of meta because you can say, well, I'm actually taking a trip into the hierarchy. I have a passport that lets me go there and I can play with pretending this, that, and the other all I want. And then I can come home when I get tired of that.
It's like putting on a different pair of glasses.
Hmm.
Things are going to look a little different for a while.
Look and feel. Yeah, look and feel. So there is no, it is truly opt-in. I just love that concept of opt-in.
Mm-hmm.
No one needs to know about the transition. I truly believe and trust that, you see, we're humans. The guys gave me a great analogy once. If you take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper
Mm-hmm.
and you hold it in the air and you have just one teeny little corner of it touching the desktop, that little intersection there is, like a little human. And then that whole 8.5 by 11-inch sheet is soul.
Yeah.
So soul is really managing the situation.
Hmm.
And there's so many things I don't have to worry about or understand.
Hmm.
I just have this opportunity to be conscious and to play as I wish. So since soul is managing everything, its souls are communicating with each other on a non-human level, and people who want to know about the transition can find me. Now, they can't find me if I never talk about it and I don't blog about it and I don't podcast about it. That would be really hard,
Yeah.
but still, technically kind of possible. But because I love it so much, because it has changed my life so much,
Mm-hmm.
and I love talking about it, then okay, therefore I blog and podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's really none of my business who listens.
Mm-hmm. Or what they think about it. What other people think of me is none of my business, is one of my
Yeah, isn't that?
favorite.
Yeah, I think Wayne Dyer came up with that, but
I think he
it
did.
is brilliant. It is brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. What other people think of me is none of my business. That's their belief
Hmm.
system. That's
Hmm.
their what some people might call their karma or their path. And they can take it or leave it.
Hmm. Because really, no two people can think alike or see things alike.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible by laws of physics. We are all living in a subjective universe influenced heavily by our own personal history and experience. And that is the filter that we see things through.
Do you feel like there is an objective component to the universe? Because we see things that seem to be pretty objective, right? I mean, how the brightness of light falls off to the square of the distance and things about gravity. And I'm probably misquoting this, but yeah, how does that work, you think? I mean, because so we talked a little bit about like death, but what about beginnings? Like, where did in the transition? And I also want to get to where that label for this perspective came from. But where does the universe begin in the transition? Where does it come from? Is it just a thought that the divine had? And we got to have some rules so things are kind of predictable. How does that work?
Well, it's a little bit above my pay grade, but I have had these same questions and I've asked the guys
Hmm.
for their take on it.
With automatic writing or just through the channel?
No, through, live sessions,
Okay,
when I'm talking verbally to them.
cool.
And so basically, in a nutshell, what they say is that, so on the side of soul, there is no space, there is no time.
Hmm.
And somehow or another, big question mark, big empty space of no way to explain how this part happened. Soul, spirit, came up with this idea of form.
Right.
What would it be like if we could create form? And lo and behold, the universes were created.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the guys, in the very beginning, spirit thought, this will just be a very short little experiment because, oh my God, living with all those limits and boundaries when we could be here in limitless everything, it's not going to last very long. Well, it has lasted eons and eons longer than spirit initially imagined because soul keeps creating so much complexity in the universe. And there seems to be no end of where things can go. And if looking at it through that lens, it's like, oh yeah, we created species that rule the earth and then they go extinct. And then we created world wars. And then we created the nuclear bomb that can destroy us. Well, that was a tipping point for spirit. It's like, well, wait a minute, if we can destroy ourselves, and we've really pushed this hierarchical game to an extreme limit place. What if we experiment being in form and remembering that we're spirit instead of forgetting? What would that be like? Well, welcome to the transition. That's what this is like. It's like, okay, I'm still here. I'm still in form. I'm choosing to accept the limits and boundaries that come with space and time. How do I want to play now? And it's a completely different experience. And hardly anybody even knows about the transition. So who knows how long all of this will go on? But isn't it interesting to note that every precipice that humanity has come up against, we figure out a way out because spirit still wants to be here. Spirit is still having fun being in form.
Do you feel like it's for entertainment or for lack of a better term, knowledge or growth?
Entertainment. Spirit knows everything there is to know. So it's purely for entertainment. Again, there is no moral imperative in this mindset. And since everything is in support of spirit having fun and each soul having the kinds of experiences that they want to have, then we get to where there is no good advice. There is nothing that the earthlings need to hear. Those are just things that people are wanting to do. And in a sense, a lot of channeling is very much a part of the hierarchical game because the elements of it are based in hierarchical ideas, good and bad. You need this, you should. That person has more knowledge than I have. All of that kind of stuff shows up. And, it's part of what's kind of a kick working with the guys is because they will say, we don't care what you do. We'll talk out a problematic situation and they will say, well, the energy's all confused here because of, this is what we see.
So that brings the question, right? Why would...
And then they'll suggest things and say, we don't care what you do. Because I might say at first, ooh, that's too hard. I don't know that I can really do that. Fire that client. That is too scary. Then you sit with it for a week and then it's like, oh, well, I think I'm willing to try.
Well, what I was going to ask was, then why do they provide this information if they don't really care how it is used? Is that a fair question?
It's a very fair question. It's only because there are souls like me who are bored with the hierarchical game. I was so steeped in New Age ideas, looking for self-acceptance, and it didn't come.
Really?
Because even the best of the New Age ideas are still premised on there's a good way and a bad way.
Isn't there a more effective way to get something done and a less effective way? Maybe in terms of time?
For sure, but that's very individualized.
True.
And virtually, quote, everyone who is selling a new age or traditional or whatever solution is assuming that the formula or the effective methodology that worked for them will work for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the myths of humanity. And it's a good, watchword for me because the transition has changed my life. I'm not convinced I'd still be alive, quite frankly,
Wow.
without going into all the details. But I
Wow.
am having the time of my life the older I get. And
Yay.
yeah, exactly. Yay. So there's a part of me that wants to tell everyone about the transition.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
so that's sort of that's a common enough human instinct.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that it wouldn't be the transition if I do any of that under the guise of the hierarchy. So I keep backing up from trying to find a formula to promote the transition. The
Hmm.
transition shall not be promoted.
But you do kind of promote the transition, which is kind of segue to one of my questions, which was, in terms of your promotion, I mean, you do have a newsletter, which is wonderful,
Hmm.
and you talk about the transition a little bit on social media.
Hmm.
How do you find the balance of that? And also, this is a question I like to ask people is, do you use, because it's become such a big part of our lives, in communicating ideas, do you use social media every day and how do you find balance with it?
To answer your first question, I run it through a filter of, do I really want to say this now?
Mm-hmm.
And so my podcast is a great example. I'll talk about that for a minute.
Oh, yes, please.
Um, I started it last July and I have 3 episodes out.
But they're all
And
great.
thank you very much. I appreciate your opinion. Um,
They are.
I'm
Everybody
sure
should listen
there are
to
some
them.
people who disagree with you. Now,
Wow.
I joined a women's podcasting group before I started that
Oh,
because
cool.
I wanted to. I hadn't podcasted for a year or two, and my podcast had been video,
Yep.
not audio, and they're very different beasts in my experience.
Yeah.
And everyone else in this group is following the official how to do a podcast right methodology.
Right.
And that's to set up a publishing schedule, and that's to do this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm. Every week or every other week or even once a
Yes,
month.
yes. And my podcast will not be sucked in to the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
I
Amen.
I would like to think that I would like a publishing schedule, but my life has been too erratic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I now have data, after the fact data,
Mm-hmm.
which is the best data.
Mm-hmm.
Predictive data is worth basically zilch in my world over here in the transition. But I have historical data. I can look now. Okay, well, I've done 3 episodes since July, so that's one every couple of months. That
Yeah.
is my publishing schedule at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do is I wait until I have an irresistible urge.
Mm.
I wait until the quote stars are lined up.
Mm.
I'm constantly collecting ideas and have, half a dozen draft scripts. I
Mm-hmm.
keep researching tools and technology, and I have allowed myself to only podcast when it just feels really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super oddball
Yeah.
kind of formula. I'm the first to admit. And there's a part of me that wishes I could do it more often, but it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't happened. And I'm not into forcing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of these things. The transition is like you don't have to force anything. You can work hard as you want. You could set up a schedule and then see if you can stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if that schedule sticking to ness, sticking to my schedule-ness,
Yeah.
is based on hierarchical pressure, I really don't want that anywhere near my podcast. My
Mm.
podcast is, about the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So that's an example there. I have another friend who is very steeped in the transition. My friend who first told me about the guys,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a musician, and she had no, she had a little formal training, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
She really wanted to sing. So, long story short, she put together an album, and she released. This was back before music streaming services, and so she, put the CD out. She pressed all the CDs. She shared them around, and they started developing a really strong word of mouth component.
Oh, wonderful.
And then she started thinking, well, I have to advertise
Mm-hmm.
because how will anyone know that I have a CD? So, in conversation with the guys, it became very clear that she hates advertising.
I can relate to that. I used to.
Yeah, yeah. So they asked this very, transitional question. Well, then why would you advertise?
Hmm.
And she said, because I have to, because I'm supposed to, because how will, and fill in all that stuff of the little mind who
Mm-hmm.
can't see that actually souls have a network of communication that we're not privy to.
Mm-hmm.
So she has sold over 1 million CDs. She never advertised.
Wow.
People started going into New Age bookstores asking for her music. And so then the bookstores went to their distributor and said, who is this person? Can you get it? Because she shared it with a few therapists. I was one of them. I was teaching yoga and teaching meditation at Rancho La Puerta, and I'd play her music, and then people would want to buy it.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's a great business case study because she used it one as a transition training ground of how to do something that you love and work really hard at it. It wasn't easy, all of the learning that she had to do,
Of course, yeah.
speaking of logic.
Yeah.
And
Which we're using to record this podcast right now.
right, right.
Yeah.
But she did it, and she's never had to advertise.
Wow. And it sounds like most of it is just word of mouth type of thing, referrals.
It was word of mouth, and then it was, instead of her begging a distributor to carry her, the bookstores pressured the distributor to find her.
Wow. I would love that problem with my books.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Could happen. I have a book coming out soon.
So part of that is like this radio signal.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're putting out a radio signal, if it's, oh, I have this really amazing information, there's no pressure, and it's all about your subjective universe, but you better sign up for my newsletter, and you better come to my workshops, and you better buy it and tell all your friends.
Yeah.
It's like one is canceling out the other.
Mm. And you can feel that on the websites too. You go to, you'd be like, this person really, really wants me to take this action, and it feels like a need. It feels like a
Yeah.
and
They need you to love them so they feel good about themselves.
boom. Thank you for saying
Boom.
that.
Mhm. Now, they have every right as the divine to play it that way.
Yeah.
And we see many examples of people being very successful doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back in this circular meta logic of, it doesn't matter what you do. You can do anything you want.
Do it your
and you can
style.
see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot in terms of my own work. There's so much. Yeah, I mean, even talking about a podcast schedule like this show, I may just record all the interviews before I release any of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great plan in a way if there's nothing time sensitive, because then it's, you've got a season now that
mhm.
Apple Podcast supports seasons. It's like, okay, I've got 10 episodes, season one.
That's
You're going to roll
right.
them out. Boom, boom, boom.
I totally forgot that iTunes does seasons now.
Yeah.
That's the way I thought of this, Rox. This is really season 2 of I call this the Aravinda show because Aravinda is probably the terribly mispronounced Hindi word for lotus, which is my metaphor for personal growth. The lotus kind of pushes up through the dirt, and reaches to the surface, and that's why my book series, my science fiction series, is called Epic of Aravinda, because it's a mythologically based, but it's like personal growth, science fiction, fast-paced story. Yeah,
Fantastic.
and that's what I've thought about this is it really feels like season 2, even though season 1 was pretty short. Season 1 was a lot of fun, but season 1 was 3 years ago. Wow, how time flies.
And even depending on where your hosting is, you can go back in and reassign those earlier episodes to a season.
Oh, that's a really smart idea. Thank you, Rox.
Yeah.
I'm actually hosting this in WordPress in my own system, and I
Hmm.
believe that the software plugin that I'm using, I sound like an old man. The software plugin. I think I can probably do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Good,
um,
good.
a little bit inside baseball, but
So just as a sidebar, I love that idea,
thank you.
but I was too antsy to start podcasting.
Oh yeah. Well, you didn't even have an RSS feed for the Transition podcast for a long time.
Well, I wanted to put out a couple of episodes before I submitted it to the store.
Right.
So, to the Apple Podcast Store. I host at Libsyn and they generate an RSS feed automatically. So
Right.
I think you actually said you found my RSS feed
I had to
before I
search.
had.
People, I'll put this in the show
I did
notes.
not make it easy for people.
We'll put it in the show notes, which can be found at
Uh-huh,
myth.li,
uh-huh.
myth.li, and I'll put in a link to your podcast. And is it okay if people find the RSS feed now?
I would love for people to listen to
Okay.
my
Are
podcast.
you in iTunes yet? I think you might be.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I got in with less than 48 hours.
Oh, beautiful.
It was really
In the
quick.
Transition podcast.
And I'm everywhere, iHeartRadio and Google Play and everything. So that's that part where I wasn't especially thrilled about doing all of that mechanical process,
Yeah.
but I do want to make it available to anyone who is interested.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very happy to slog through submitting my podcast to
Mm-hmm.
all these different directories.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a different analogy than the I hate advertising.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think my AirPods are dying. So
Oh, okay.
if you will hold 1 second, I will just plug in a pair of
Yes.
wired headphones. Be right back. Part of the good news, bad news too, is that since the transition goes by the fact that we are each living in a subjective universe, not an objective one, then each person's transition is different.
Right.
And oh my gosh, one, that's very liberating because that means I don't have to figure out what anyone else's transition is. That's their job. But it also means that, there was a good 10 years probably in my relationship where I confused the transition and how my partner was supposed to be doing it.
Oh boy.
And that didn't make for very happy times.
No.
Because I was trying to impose my transition on him, and nope, 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 that's not going to work.
Boy, we could do a whole season on this.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
so much to explore.
yes.
But when it comes to talking about the transition and reaching out, how do you balance using, you mentioned Instagram a minute before, which is really the only social media site that I find I'm excited to check. I don't really use the other ones very much anymore. How do you find balance with that? And do you touch it every day?
I definitely touch it every day. A large part of my work, starting in about 2005, was a very deep dive into social media because I loved WordPress. Again, had been building systems by
Right.
hand,
That's
you know,
amazing.
that WordPress now does out of the box. So it was so liberating, from a technical point of view, but then also from a messaging point of view. It's like, oh my gosh, all my clients now, they can have their own blog, they can be doing this, they can be doing that. And then, 2007, Facebook, Twitter come along. Oh, got to get on that deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasting, all of these things. So anything that helps people communicate with other people without a middle person,
Mm-hmm.
that was getting me very excited. So I went head over heels into social media. ran a bunch of marketing campaigns for various clients. Got one of our clients into podcasting in 2008, I think.
Early
They're
days.
still at it. They're going strong. It's become a huge part of they're actually a private foundation, but they have access to world-renowned writers and speakers. And so, there's just universities around the world that are using their content in the classroom. And anyway, very exciting. I love
Wow.
all that. I was just such a fangirl. I'm not anymore because it's just the hater system, the trolls, the bots,
Yeah.
is so ugh, just grown, insert massive groan here.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't actually volunteer to do it for clients anymore.
So you were actually producing podcasts for them, or you were just guiding them through the process of, okay, here's how you get a podcast into the store. This is how you set it up.
We do all the production for them.
Wow.
Yeah, so now, I check Facebook once a day,
Mm-hmm.
only because I'm an admin on about 20 pages.
Wow.
And I'm not using it very much at all for our own company or my own work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not happy with the platform. I use Instagram. I check it probably 2 or 3 times a day. I
Mm-hmm.
try to post, my 10 seconds of stillness story. That's my claim to fame right now.
I love, can we talk about that for 1 second?
Sure.
They disappear after 24 hours, right?
Hmm.
They can only be 15 seconds long. And you do this like really, it feels like 95% of the days that I check. And they're these
Hmm.
wonderful, and it could be anything, but often it's of nature or a leaf or an insect. And it's just it's stillness. You shoot this story, and it's so meditative. And it's such a wonderful little time to remind me, okay, get back into your breath, get back into the present moment. And I always enjoy them. It's such
Thank
a
you.
embracing the present moment practice for me. And I think that's what you intend for them to be.
Yes, well, this is my thing with social media these days, and there's a fine line between look at me, look at me, look at me because I need you to look at me
Mm-hmm.
versus how can I interact with social media so that it benefits me?
Mm.
And
Enriches my life.
yes, and so stopping every day to find 10 seconds of stillness is a way of stepping outside of my ruts, my routine, and engaging in my environment to find something that I would not normally see. And it's funny, people think of it as 10 seconds of silence. It's not, and sometimes they're quite noisy, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really about the stillness because you can be still, I can be still on the inside and it can be very noisy out there on the outside.
Yeah, it's
So that's
true.
the point. I try to hold the camera still. That's my goal. um,
They're quite still. I think
I
you,
usually don't have a tripod with me,
yeah.
so that's my thing. And I try to have one story up there all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
realized yesterday for the first time in a really long time, I went about 5 hours and I go, oh, I didn't update my story today.
Mm.
So I put a nighttime capture up, it's usually I try to film during the day so there's daylight. And
Yeah.
I love beauty
Mm.
in nature. So yes, most of them, though not always. I like to kind of just show my weird side every now and then.
It's a good weird side.
Yeah. Well, weird is in right now. Aren't we lucky?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It really is.
Oh, I should become very popular then.
Yeah. Nerds have been in for quite a long time and weird is now in.
Oh, I love it. I actually haven't. Maybe I'll take this as some kind of minor, very, very melodramatic victory that I haven't actually looked at Instagram yet today.
I have not either.
Oh
Yeah,
my
do you?
goodness. What's going to happen, Rox?
I think a lot of people do. Well, if it makes you feel good, it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Consciousness is everything.
I'm looking forward to seeing people. I'll put that in the show notes too. I'll link to your Instagram page because the 10 seconds of stillness, not silence. I always think of it as stillness, and I've heard
Hmm.
people say silence. Like, what do you mean? No, I mean I have a great sense of hearing too, so it's like
Uh-huh.
there's always something in the background, but it's the stillness, it's the energy of those little bits. Um, do you have any advice for people who are entrepreneurs or think about entrepreneurship and they want to grow their business or start their business in terms of thinking of at it from a transition point of view? How does someone in the transition think about growing their business and being successful?
Well, I would say that the ideas of the transition are available to anyone, anytime, as little or as much as they would like to use them.
Mm-hmm.
So what that looks like is letting you and your business come first in your life, not the formula or what other people think you should be doing with your business. And it's, of course, much easier said than done,
Yeah.
but it does offer its own rewards. And I find that the ability to tune out the noise, to allow your own biorhythms to influence how and when you work, for example, for people who are self employed and have
Mm-hmm.
control over their schedule. It's more
Mm-hmm.
challenging, obviously, if you have a retail establishment that you have to show up for.
Mm-hmm.
But to allow yourself slack when you want it and not be afraid that that's a bad thing. I'm in a writers group, and every single week, people are writing their notes, and 4 years running now, all the time, I'm reading others saying, and myself at times too, this is taking way longer than it should have. Well, should is one of those words that only exists in the hierarchy. So then I think, okay, well, I had an idea that it would take X weeks to write this chapter.
Right.
That didn't happen. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me, other than maybe I did set up an unrealistic expectation. So what
Yeah.
I've learned to do is to not front load as many things as possible, because when I front load and I say, what I think it should be, invariably life comes along and other things happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so the faster I can get to, okay, I didn't get that chapter written, this must be perfect, otherwise it wouldn't be happening, then that frees me up. And lo and behold, an idea comes in or an experience happens. Like, if you give something enough time, it happens if it's meant to happen. And
That's
if
beautiful.
if I'm enjoying the process, this is another distinction between the hierarchy and the transition. In the
Hmm.
hierarchy, the only thing that matters is the product.
Right.
If you don't have the book in your hand, you are a worthless piece of crap.
Yeah.
In the transition, it's all about the process.
Hmm.
So every 10 minutes that I spend writing is a win
Yep.
if I allow it to be one. And it may turn out, and again, you see, this is the silver linings thing we talked
Mm-hmm.
about before.
Mm-hmm.
If I think I know exactly what the route is going to be and how long it should take and how many stops there are going to be and how many gas stations, and then it turns out I'm wrong, then I can be devastated, or I can be playful and say, oh, okay, I just ran out of gas. I thought there was going to be a gas station here and there isn't one. I had to walk 3 blocks. Oh my gosh, I met the most amazing person who picked me up and brought me a gas can. You know, having the trust that there's nothing wrong with you and that all of these
Hmm.
hiccups that are happening are there not for a reason. That's kind of hierarchical thinking, but
Hmm.
they happened. You may or may not know why they happened.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about why they happened. Just keep going, or stop and sit on the side of the road and have a temper tantrum. It's really all good.
Wow.
But this whole thing of getting off your case as an entrepreneur, I think is the most powerful thing that the transition has to offer.
Getting off your case. What do you mean by that?
When something doesn't happen the way you think it should have,
Mm-hmm.
to not beat yourself up for it.
Mm. Yeah. Sometimes easier said than done.
Oh, almost always in my case. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's taken a long time to learn not to do that, not to blame myself. And even if it's quote my fault, forgot to send the check-in or whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be, to be able to then step out even further, back up a little bit more and say, well, isn't that interesting? I didn't send the check and I'm still here. I wasn't banished from the planet for doing something really seemingly stupid.
Mm-hmm.
That's getting off your case. That's radical self-acceptance.
Right.
And then again, the quicker I let go of beating myself up, the quicker I get back to, okay, now what do I want to do? How can I fix this? What's the little hidden improvement in here?
And it makes us more intelligent at the end of the day too, if we are more compassionate toward ourselves. It helps us be more compassionate toward others.
Yes. It also gives you the ability to really look at a situation. There may be things awry that were not obvious. And if you're sitting on the pity pot or self-flagellating, it might not be possible to see those more nuanced factors.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's not a moral imperative to get off your case, because that doesn't exist over here in the transitional way of thinking. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can get off your case, mechanically speaking, your mind can function more clearly.
Mm.
So just go for the mechanics of it.
Yeah. Try it out and see if it works, see if it helps
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah.
How do you see your experience of the transition and even the way you apply it, even just in terms of entrepreneurship, changing over time in your business and in other businesses you see? I mean, one of the things that amazes me and what I love about Hawaii as a state is there is such a feeling of entrepreneurship, especially where I used to live on the Big Island. There are so many conscious businesses, and that is largely what this interview series is about as well. How do you see the future? I mean, I'm sure the idea of the future probably doesn't even exist in the transition.
You got it. Next question.
Okay, we can shut it down. It's over. Just kidding. But we have a concept of the future. We have a concept of growth and change.
Right, but why should I be concerned about that right now?
Hmm.
See, it's an intellectual idea that can be fun to play with,
Yeah, I think
but
that's yeah.
yeah. So most of the time, though, I would say, and a million people have said this, the power is in the present.
Mm-hmm. Present moment.
Yeah, the present moment. The past is an idea and the future is not yet happened. And, bringing those feelings into the present kind of muddies up the present. And it makes it harder to see and feel what's actually happening right now. And that is one of the biggest muscles that I've had to build, because, again, my history was constantly focused on mine the past to look for trouble in the present so I can be safe in the future.
Wow.
And talk about exhausting and no fun. And yet that's how a lot of people, that's how, I had a lot of company in that. That's how most systems are set up, even. Oh, you have
Wow.
to know what went wrong in the past so you can prevent it in the future. Well, maybe, maybe not. That's assuming you can know what went wrong. And that's a really grandiose assumption.
So, what do you say when someone goes, well, I have to figure out what went wrong in the past so I can, feel safe in the present? How do you,
Have at it.
uh,
You're the divine. You can sit and make notes and research. And if that's valuable, that's awesome. And it will be more effective if you do it in the present. And this is again where it gets very meta and kind of confusing, because there's nothing wrong with anything anyone does.
hmm,
It's about the energy. And if, for example, you have an item in your to-do list that says, research why that thing didn't launch the way I hoped it would,
Mm.
and you stare at it for 3 months and you never feel inclined to actually do it.
Oh boy.
Like you don't wake up one day and say, "You know what? I am going back into my Google Analytics. I am
Mm.
going to look at, you know, how
Trigger
many
warning,
opens that."
everybody. Trigger warning.
Really, I'm going to see how many people opened that email newsletter when I announced that new season. And I'm going to just trace the heck out of that thing and see if I can
Mm.
find where the problem was. But
Mm.
see, that's because in that moment you want to do that.
Right.
And after 3 months, it hasn't been done. I just take it out of my to-doist.
Yeah, me
I
too.
just go, well, I thought that I wanted to do that, but obviously it hasn't resonated for me. So I'm going to remove it. And you're welcome to show up again later if you like.
Mm-hmm.
But
And that desire
you're
might come
cluttering up
back.
my list right now. It may,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you make space and go, I'm not going to be attached to this having to happen. But if that is important, it will
Hmm.
end up back on that list.
Yes.
But I completely agree. I've had that happen where I put something, I call it like an aspirational to do. It's like if all the planets align.
Number one, be a better person.
Mm.
That's just a joke. That's the subtext of most to-do lists in the
Right.
hierarchy.
Right. Start 4 new 30-day trials and become the perfect person in 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can learn a lot. What you've said reminded me of something. What you ignore on your to-do list for 3 months can tell
Mm-hmm.
you a lot about your feelings towards
Mm-hmm.
certain projects.
Mm-hmm.
If you really haven't done anything for that thing and you've looked at it 100 times or 200 times or even 20 times and you've taken no action and it's just been it means it's not a priority. There's that
Right.
old cliche, but it's kind of true. If it's a priority, it's done.
Yes. Yes. If your soul really thinks that's important,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to line up the stars to support you. Now, it gets confusing for sure because we each have that little kid inside of us who
Mm-hmm.
isn't capable of doing that thing.
Mm.
And sometimes it's the kid who puts things on the list and then
Oh
wants
God, yes.
the grown-up person to do it. And sometimes it's kind of the reverse. The adult says, "Yeah, I really want to do that." And then little kid, because the kid says they can't figure out how that would ever be done, keeps throwing up flares. "Don't go there. Don't go there. Danger zone. Look over here instead." In my baby steps in the transition, I can't always know if it was little me or big me coming and going. So I
Yeah.
just decide, you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I'm the divine incarnate. And here's the decision I'm making today. A month from now, I may realize, oop, that was my little self masquerading as big me. So I'll learn another one. Okay.
That's beautiful. Well, is there anything that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up? Or is there anything that you'd like to promote or plug? Transition doesn't like advertising, but
Not necessarily. I'm just my friend did not like advertising, so she didn't do it. I have a lot of little monkey mind vulnerabilities because I used to actually love marketing and advertising, and my
mm-hmm.
brain can go to town. So I I just want to consciously manage that and not let my little self, um, who can really come up with some great campaign ideas,
I believe it.
because she feels I have to, and I get to
Mm-hmm.
do it by choice. But no, it's really, social media started almost 20 years ago now
Oh my goodness. Is
on
that?
this. Yeah, I mean, WordPress 2004, I consider that like early social media when you can have your own blog, your own online
Yeah.
voice.
Or even Blogspot and Blogger.
Yeah, those were even earlier.
Yeah.
Apple, One World. Yeah, I was there.
One World.
Do you remember that?
I
That
remember
was
eWorld.
eWorld. Maybe it was eWorld. One. Anyway, Apple had two different iterations or attempts at online diaries.
That's
Anyway,
right.
let's not be sidetracked.
I just wanted to mention eWorld in a podcast and see if the internet crashes. I was on eWorld. It was like 1994, 1995. It was so weird.
It was so early, I know.
Oh man. But yes, you were saying.
Authenticity. To
Yeah.
thine own self be true.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea has been around for a long time, but it's been basically a minefield
Mm.
of confusing self-destruction bombs all over it. Be true to yourself unless it upsets your boss. Be true to yourself unless your husband doesn't like it. Fill in the blank. And
Mm-hmm.
we now have an incredible opportunity in the time space continuum of humanity, um, for people to create and to build things and to share things and to sell things in ways like never before.
Mostly because the internet has allowed it to be possible.
Yeah, very much so. So the transition says you are safe to be that weird, one of a kind person.
You know what's ironic about that, or maybe not that ironic, is when you are self accepting and you do allow yourself to be your weird self, you end up creating more value.
Very often that does happen. Yeah.
Yeah, for other people, I've
A lot of good
found.
examples of that.
So, what would you like people to check out if they'd like? They could definitely check out inthetransition.com. It's got a lot of very thought provoking and powerful information on it. You want to talk
Yeah.
about the 3 U's? That looks pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. They can download my ebook there. I have a free ebook, The Three U's, where I talk about soul me, adult me, and little me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my username across social media is at Roxanne Darling. So they can find me wherever they like to hang out and say hi to me. I would love to hear from you if you've
Yeah.
listened to this.
Well, thank you so much, Rox, for joining me. And I've been looking forward to this for a while. And I'm so glad we were able to explore all the areas we got to explore today.
Well, thank you. As you can see, I love talking about it because I get more clear. It's one thing to have all these ideas in my head, but to actually be able to interact with another person like you, who's so thoughtful and good listener,
Oh,
it's good. It's wonderful. I love it. Thank you.
no, thank you. Mahalo nui loa.
Aloha.
Wow, that was definitely an interview that I will never forget. I want to say a big mahalo once again to Rox for sharing her afternoon with me. I don't know about you, but I will be thinking about what we talked about for a while. Also, before I go, I want to remind you that if you enjoyed this interview, there are others that are out and more are coming. iTunes is probably the easiest way to find them and get the new ones when they come out. Just search for Aravinda Show. That's Aravinda Show. If you like Instagram, I'm Hello Crusoe on there. That's the word hello, Crusoe. And I post samples of new interviews when they come out. So that's another way to make sure you don't miss any upcoming interviews. Also, be sure to check out Roxanne on there and see some beautiful glimpses of Maui plus 10 seconds of stillness that we talked about. She is Roxanne Darling on Instagram, just as it sounds, RoxanneDarling. You can also check her out at inthetransition.com, of course, and that will all be in the show notes for this episode over at Mythly, myth.li is my website. You can go there, click on Aravinda Show. It's really easy to find show notes and all the great interviews, as well as free samples of my books, including my upcoming book, 10,000 Hours in Paradise, a true story about my life-changing adventures on Hawaii. I have some big-time interviews coming up, and I can't wait to share them with you. Once again, I'm Andrew Crusoe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.